Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath with Forbes Breaking News. A typhoon has made landfall in Japan, and millions of people are under evacuation orders. Here to explain more about this situation is Jason Nicholls. He's AccuWeather's lead international forecaster. Jason, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here.
So tell us about this typhoon. And I understand just within the last few hours, it's actually been downgraded to a tropical storm. What do we need to know here?
Yeah, that's right. It came in ashore earlier on Thursday in Kyushu um, as a Category 2 hurricane equivalent, wind gusts to 120 miles per hour. It is now that it's moved over land. It is since the weekend, or lost wind intensity. Now it's down to a tropical storm. The main threat going forward now that the winds are kind of subsided, the main threat is going to be heavy rain, especially with the system expected to slow. It looks like it's moving gradually northeastward to east northeastward, but at some point, I think Friday night or Saturday, it's going to stall and kind of sit in the same area for maybe 24, 36 hours before the next front comes along and finally picks it up and pushes it off the east coast of Honshu, probably early next week. Probably, I'm guessing some point later Tuesday at this point.
Later Tuesday. So that's an extended period, but I want to go back to those wind speeds that you mentioned. How high had the wind gotten, and how strong are the gusts right now?
Right now, the strongest gusts are somewhere in the vicinity of hurricane force, which is about 75 miles per hour. There could be on some of the elevated areas where there may be observations a little more sparse. Probably up at upwards of 80 miles per hour, but at its peak, as it was starting to move across the northern Ryukyu Islands, it got to a Category 4 hurricane equivalent, which gave you gusts to 140, 150 miles per hour. But fortunately, by the time it made landfall in Kyushu on Thursday, it had run into some drier air, some stronger wind shear, so it lost some wind intensity by the time it finally made that landfall on Kyushu earlier on Thursday, local time.
Okay, so that was the wind. And what about rainfall? I've seen numbers like 60 centimeters, which is 2 feet of water. How much rain is falling on the ground in Japan right now?
Near where it made landfall, there's been widespread amounts of 1 to 2 feet of rain, like 12 to 24 inches, even some local amounts approaching 3 feet, like 36 inches, 33, 34, I think is the highest I saw so far. As the system moves eastward very slowly, I think we could continue to see, just due to the fact that it looks like it probably stalls for a time over the course of the weekend, we could see areas maybe as far east as around Osaka getting 12, maybe 24 inches of rain with the system, especially if it slows and stalls in the area for 24, 36 hours.
What does this system mean for people on the ground in Japan? What are the communities right now that should be on alert or evacuating? Can you break down for us the human aspect here?
Big thing is widespread flooding, life-threatening flooding with the rain amounts we've been talking about. We're talking of rainfall in feet instead of inches. So life-threatening flooding. It's mostly across southwest Japan, Kyushu, southwest Honshu, that area, maybe as far east as Osaka. I think eventually we'll get some rain into like the Tokyo area, but nothing like what they saw with the typhoon a few weeks ago. In Tokyo, I think by the time everything's all said and done with the rainfall from the typhoon, it's probably like 2 to 4 inches of rain from that system. But the heavier rains will be to their west and kind of in the southwest Japan area, where the system's going to be very slow moving and maybe even stall for a bit.
So heavier rain in the west and the southwest of Japan, 2 to 4 inches in the Tokyo area. I imagine that the instructions for people differ on where they live, right? So is the Southwest under evacuation and folks in the Tokyo area just being told to sandbag or reinforce their windows? What's the difference there?
I'm going to guess the evacuations are closer to where it made landfall across southwest Japan, where the heaviest of the rain has been so far and the strongest winds have been so far. I think farther east, they're probably taking precautions. as the rain mounts will be lighter and the winds should not be as big of a factor. But I still wouldn't let my guard down if I was in the Tokyo area, because maybe the system comes a little bit farther south and it's maybe a little slower moving. Maybe it could be even higher rain amounts depending on exactly where the center tracks.
So we've been talking about typhoon and you mentioned hurricane winds, and I just want to pull back a little bit. Here in the Northeast, we talk about hurricanes all the time this time of year. What is the difference between a typhoon and a hurricane?
Just a naming convention, semantics, more or less. Typhoon is the same thing. If you had a math equation, typhoon equals hurricane. It's just in the West Pacific, they call them typhoons. In the East Pacific, Central and East Pacific, and in the Atlantic, they're referred to as hurricanes.
Now, Jason, you mentioned the typhoon that hit the Tokyo area a few weeks ago. What can you say about typhoon season, so to speak? Are we at the height of it right now? And how is the activity this year comparing to prior years?
Yeah, we're in the peak part of this hurricane or typhoon season, I should say, in the West Pacific. It generally runs from June through September, October time period. Right now, we were below average through July. I think we've gotten a little bit more active here in August. We're still, we're probably closing in on normal, but a lot of the systems have been on the weaker side, especially, well, in it, the exception being Shanshan here did get to a major hurricane's equivalent. Still no super typhoons though in the West Pacific, which is a little unusual for as compared to normal.
What is a super typhoon?
Sustained winds over 140 miles per hour.
And how many super typhoons do we typically see in a year?
Generally about maybe I think the average is around 4, and we should have had at least 1 by now. And the closest we've gotten is I think we've had a couple get to category 4.
Wow, normally way more than what we've seen this year. What's the cause for this difference?
A lot of it has to do with some ocean water temperatures, some cooler than normal ocean water temperatures in the Central Pacific. Also, some cooler waters in the Northwest Pacific as well, which has kind of shifted the main development area. Instead of being maybe more towards Guam in that area, it's been pushed a little bit more westward. So it's been more favored. A lot of the development has been favored more towards the Philippine Sea and a little bit farther north as well. We've seen a lot of the development probably north of the Philippines and to the west of Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. So that's a change from what we saw last year. Guam got hit a few times last year. They've yet to been hit by a tropical system at this point so far this year. And I don't know if that's going to change looking at the ocean temperatures.
I was just about to ask about those ocean temperatures because we hear so often, at least on the East Coast, about warming ocean temperatures. How rare is it within the context of the last 5, 6, 7 years for ocean water to get cooler?
We had that with La Nina well, not last year, the previous few years. There was a lot of cooling in the Central and Eastern Pacific because of the wind flow leading to cooler ocean water temperatures due to upwelling. That's kind of that reversed last year, and we had some warming with El Nino, and now we're kind of trying to transition to La Nina. Again, that's resulted in some cooling across the central and eastern equatorial Pacific, but we still have a lot of warm water farther west, and I think that's part of the reason why we've seen a lot of development a little bit closer to Eastern Asia, leading to a little bit more impacts, because a lot of the really warm waters are Philippine Sea, South China Sea, East China Sea, so off of Eastern China, off of the Philippines, and off of Japan.
Interesting. So you have you said upwelling. So that's basically the cooler water from the bottom getting to the top, but then there's still warm water further in the west that's causing tropical systems.
Yeah, basically upwelling is the wind is kind of pushing the warmer waters near the surface away and allowing the cooler waters underneath to rise up to the surface. So you had the right idea there. Yeah.
Now let's go back to AccuWeather's forecast for Japan and the regions affected by this typhoon, now tropical storm, over the next few days. What can folks on the ground expect on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday? I know you mentioned Tuesday as a potential end date, so take us through each day.
Okay, so very heavy rains will likely continue across southwest Japan through at least Sunday, with the system, like I said, probably stalling somewhere in the vicinity of Osaka, not exactly right over them, but in that general vicinity. I think it gets to near Osaka on Saturday and it just kind of stews there for a bit before finally getting kicked out. So daily rainfall's going to be several inches to maybe a foot or more. And in the area where it sits and actually kind of stalls, I think that's probably where you get your heaviest rain, where you'll probably see 1 to 2 feet of rain before it finally exits the region.
Anything else we should know about Typhoon Shanshan? How do you pronounce it?
Shanshan, I believe, is. I looked up the pronunciation before.
Anything else we should know about this typhoon, now tropical storm, that I've not asked, but is important for folks watching to know?
Kind of the big takeaway is the system is moving very, very slowly. There's a front moving through now that's kind of helped push it to the east. That's going to go by, and then it's going to get left behind and kind of stew around in the overall light steering flow till the next front comes along and picks it up. And that's the big takeaway, I guess, would be it's going to be a very, very slow moving system. So it's going to sit over an area for a very long period of time. So the main threat, even though the winds have dropped down, is going to be life-threatening flooding over the next several days.
Slow moving system, life-threatening flooding, and I imagine the direction for folks on the ground is listen to local authorities, evacuate if that's what you've been told.
Yes. If you've been told to evacuate, I would evacuate because this system, although, like I said, it's weakened to a tropical storm, it's going to be very slow moving, still a threat for very, very heavy rainfall and flooding.
Jason Nicholls, international forecaster for AccuWeather, thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate your insight and your explanations here.
And great to be here.